Ever since the announcement of mature N64 games coming to the Switch Online service as a separate application, I've always wondered what other M-rated games could possibly be put on there. So I did some research on how many M-rated games are actually on the N64. Turns out, there's only 28, which is embarrassingly low. So, I'm going to go through all the M-rated games that ever released on the N64 and rating the games from most likely to be put on there to least likely to be put on the Switch Online service, from 10 being most likely to 1 being the least likely. And I'm not going to talk about 2 N64 M-rated games because 2 of them have already been put on there. So, there's only 26 to go through, so let's go through them. First up, we have a game called Shadow Man releasing in 1999. This game is apparently a Metroidvania-type action-adventure game that has gameplay similar to Castlevania and similar to Metroid as well, hence the Metroidvania-type subplot. I think this could have been put on there highly, but the issue is that there was already a remaster in 2021 and recently a Nintendo Switch port of that in 2022. So because of that, I'm gonna rate this a 3, because there's part of me that wants to believe it might get put on there, but since it got remastered, it's highly unlikely. Next up, we have a game called Mace: The Dark Age releasing in 1997 in the arcades and that same year on the N64. This game is a fighting game, very similar to Mortal Kombat in terms of its extreme violence. And this game was actually developed by Atari Games, but it was published on the N64 by Midway Games. Because of the fact that it only ever released in the arcades and on the N64, I think this is highly likely to maybe get put on there. So I'm gonna maybe give this a 7, because I think it's highly likely they might put it on there just to have a fighting game on there. Next up, we have the confusingly named Doom 64, because everyone thought this was just a Nintendo 64 version of the original Doom when it was actually just an entirely new game. Now, we all know what Doom is. First-person shooter, one of the most influential shooters in the genre. It needs no introduction, so moving on from that. Now, this would be great on the Switch Online service. I think this would be amazing. There's one issue though. It's already been re-released on the Nintendo Switch in the original format on the online store. So they're not. I don't think they're going to put it on the online service because of that. So this is a 2 because I'm giving it a generous points. I should probably just give this a 0, but I'm going to give a generous point to go 2 because I love Doom so much. Next up is a game called Forsaken, which came out in 1998. Forsaken is a first-person shooter, probably inspired by Doom. I've never heard of this game, so I can't really tell you much about this. All I know is that it's a first-person shooter. A remastered version did come out in 2018 for its 20th anniversary, but it never released on the Nintendo Switch. So, because of the fact there was no versions of it on Nintendo Switch, this is most likely probably going to put on there. So, I'm going to give this maybe a 6. Because they're going to want to put a first-person shooter on there. Wait, no, they already do with Perfect Dark. Nah, I'm going to still give it a 6. Next up is a game called Nightmare Creatures, which released in 1997. Nightmare Creatures, as you could probably already tell, is a survival horror game. Not like Resident Evil, but hey, still a survival horror. I don't really know much about this game either, so this game has never received any sort of remaster or remake or anything like that, and because it hasn't really been re-released on much consoles nowadays, yeah, I could see this probably being put on there. So I'll give this a 6, because they want to put a survival horror game, unlike another one which will come up very shortly, believe me. You'll know this survival horror game when you see it. Next is a game called BioFreaks, which released in 1998. This game is yet another fighting game, not just a normal fighting game, but a 3D fighting game. Ooh. And it was developed by Midway and published by Midway. So, again, similar to Mortal Kombat. Because probably not a lot of people know this game even exists, and since it never re-released on any other console to this date, it could get put on there. But since no one really knows it, I am skeptical it will get put on there. So I'll give this a 5. So it's like halfway. I'll give this a 5. Speaking of Mortal Kombat, we have Mortal Kombat Trilogy and Mortal Kombat 4 releasing in 1996 and 1997 respectively. I would absolutely love these games to be put on the Switch Online service because I absolutely love Mortal Kombat. It is my favourite fighting game series. But the issue is, it's Mortal Kombat. It's probably way too famous to get put on there. I would love for it to happen, but it's Warner Bros. Warner Bros. Owns the rights to the Mortal Kombat franchise, so... and they're kind of when it comes to stuff like this, so it's very low. But because I'm optimistic and I kind of want to see Mortal Kombat get put on there, and considering Mortal Kombat Trilogy combines elements from Mortal Kombat 1 2, and 3 and combines them into one game, and then we have Mortal Kombat 4, that basically means we have 4 more combat games on the same online service. That would be amazing. But I don't know. I'm giving this a 6. I might be too optimistic, but I'm giving this a 6. Next is the cult classic Carmageddon 64, which released in 1998. This game, as I said, is a cult classic. It basically combines very violent combat along with racing. And I think that's pretty cool. So because the 64 mature thing doesn't have a racing game yet, that could be the racing game they want to put on there. So I'm giving Carmageddon 64 a 7 because I think Nintendo will want to put a racing game on there that is violent like Carmageddon 64. And I think it will be pretty cool because, like I said, it's a cult classic game. Next up, we have the big motherfucker of them all, Conker's Bad Fur Day, which released in 2001. Conker's Bad Fur Day is yet another cult classic game, and the game that I think I can safely say everyone thought was going to be the first game to be announced for the online service. So yeah, everyone knows Conker's Bad Fur Day at this point. Great cult classic game. It's an amazing 3D platformer that takes the piss out of every other 3D platformer before it, and it's hilarious, and I absolutely love it, and it's one of my favorite games of all time. And because a lot of rare games have been re-released across all of the Nintendo Switch online services now, like the N64, the Perfect Dark being one of them, eventually, you know, on Super Nintendo, Nintendo Entertainment System, probably Game Boy for all I know, they're going to put more rare games on there. So because of that, it's a 10, because I believe they only made this service just so they could put Conker's Bad Fur Day on there. I'm telling you now, it's a 10. Next, we have Turok 2, released in 1998, Turok Rage Wars, released in 1999, and Turok 3, released in 2000. Two of them are sequels to the original Turok, which actually has already been released on the service as of now, and Rage Wars is a completely separate game from the series, but it's the same, you know, thing. Or whatever it is. Because of the first game already being put on the service, I'm going to give this an 8. Because I think it's a good chance that it will get put on there. There's a chance they might not, but I think there's a very, very high chance all 3 of those games will get put on the service eventually. Next is ECW Hardcore Revelation, which came out in 2000. Considering ECW doesn't even exist anymore, ended up being rebranded as NXT later on. Yes, I'm a wrestling nerd as well. Woo me. I'm pretty sure this is a 0 because ECW don't exist anymore and there's no way WWE will allow them to re-release that game on their service. No, they will not. Next is a game called War Gods, which released in 1996 on the arcades and 1997 on N64, PlayStation, and PC. This game is yet another fighting game, but this time it's actually more influenced by Mortal Kombat than the other fighting games I've already mentioned, even being developed by the same company, Midway Games. Just like BioFreaks, I think this game could get put on there for not being well known, but at the same time, since it's by Midway Games, and Warner Bros. Also owns Midway Games now, or, you know, just straight brought the rights to all their franchises, I don't think this is highly likely. So I'll give this, again, a 5. Similar to BioFreaks, I'll give this a 5. Half there, half not. Next up, we have Quake 1 and Quake 2, releasing in 1996 and 1997 respectively. Quake is another first-person shooter developed by the motherfuckers of them all, id Software. And because this game gets re-released to death just like Doom, I'm pretty sure this is very unlikely to get put on the service. So I'll give this a 3 because I love id Software and I'm very optimistic about this one as well, but 3. I don't think it's very likely. Next, we have Duke Nukem 64 and Duke Nukem 0 Hour, released in 1996 and 1999 respectively. These, however, I think are highly likely to get put on there because Duke Nukem is a very classic game. It has been re-released very recently, but I wouldn't say, you know, there aren't a lot of first-person shooters that could get put on there more than Duke Nukem, in my opinion. You know, and considering the other Duke Nukem game, the one that released in 1999, that one only released on the N64 and nowhere else, so that's very highly likely to get put on there, so I'll give that one an 8. But Duke Nukem 64 I think is less likely because it has been more re-released as of late, so I'll give Duke Nukem 64 a 5. I think half of it because they might put on there for like, ooh, Duke Nukem's on there, you know? But the other half I don't think so because it's been re-released to death at this point. Next up, Resident Evil 2, which released in 1998. This game is obviously one of the greatest survival horror games to have ever been made, and because of that, I think it is highly likely to get put on there because of Nintendo having a strong partnership with Capcom for all these years. But it has got re-released quite a few times, even full-blown remade in 2019, I think it was, or some I can't remember. I don't really follow Resident Evil 2 that much. Or Resident Evil for that matter. But because they never released it on the Nintendo Switch, I'd say they're going to give that the thumbs up and say, yeah, we'll put Resident Evil 2 on the 64 service. So I think this is highly likely. I'll give this an 8, because very famous game, most likely going to happen because of Nintendo's strong partnership with Capcom. Next, we have the 3 South Park games. South Park, which released in 1998, South Park Chef's Love Shack, which released in 1999, and South Park Rally, which released in 2000. I think all of these are a 0 because there is no way Nintendo are going to get the rights to South Park. If they do somehow manage to do it, I will laugh my ass off. Next up, we have a game called Hexen, which released in 1997. This game is yet another first-person shooter, but unlike Doom and Duke Nukem and all the other first-person shooters I've already mentioned, this one doesn't get re-released very often. In fact, I don't think it's been re-released to modern consoles at all at the moment. So because of that alone, I'm going to give this a 7, because I think they're going to want to re-release that as probably their only first-person shooter. If it's not going to be the others I already mentioned, it's probably going to be this one. So scratch it, I'll give it an 8. And finally, for our 26th M-rated game, we have Daikatana, which released in 2000. This is, again, another first-person shooter, so should I need to say more? However, unlike the other first-person shooters I mentioned, apart from maybe the previous one, this one was god-awful. And because of that, it never saw the light of day other than the N64 and PC. So because of that alone, I'll give this game a 5 because it didn't re-release on anything else. And I think they're just going to want to put it on there just to have yet another first-person shooter on there. But I could be wrong. They could skip this one because of how terrible it is. So that's it. Did you agree with my ratings? Well, I hope so. Well, whether you did or you didn't, let me know in the comments either way. And thank you so much for watching. And did I make this just to rant about how Cocker's Bad Fur Day had not been put on the service yet? You're damn right.